Hey everybody, the Culinary Shut-In here, and today's video is called Easy as Pie. No one said ever. Um, I have had a love-hate relationship with pie crust, and about 10 or 11 years ago I was shown how to make a very crispy good pie crust from scratch. So to make this pie crust, we're going to have a silpat mat so things don't slip, rolling pin, a pastry cloth. I always have a spare, and this is my spare one, and it includes a cloth and a rolling pin cover. And then a pastry dough cutter. I actually have this in my favorites. I've had several over the years, and this one is truly my favorite. Here's the pastry cloth that I'm going to use. I always put the date on it because you don't wash these. You literally scrape them clean and put them in the refrigerator. Now this one is new, hasn't been used, so might have a little bit more of a difficult time on the first rollout, but it's just such a great tool. And basically I just, spread it out over the silpat mat so that things don't slip when I'm rolling out the pie crust. And then I take the sleeve and I put that over the rolling pin. And once again, this just makes for a much easier experience in rolling out the pie crust. So there you have it. We've got our pastry cloth and our rolling pin cover ready to go. The pie crust recipe that I'm going to use is listed in the recipe section. But to make this pie crust, you are going to need salt, Crisco, ice cold water, flour, and a nice wide bowl. So we're going to measure out some flour, and it's quarantine. I'm getting very low on flour, so I'm really digging to get this. But you're going to use for a single pie crust 1 cup of flour. And unlike most baking, I'm not going to even this out with a leveler. I want it to be a little bit over full. So 1 cup of all-purpose flour, and you're going to add to that 1 tablespoon of all-purpose flour. And again, same thing, I'm not leveling this, I am just taking a rounded tablespoon of flour. Now to this, we are going to add 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Now this, I am going to use typical bakery protocol and, baking protocol and scrape that off. So 1/2 teaspoon of table salt. So I'm going to get my pastry dough cutter, and I'm going to use that to just mix this together, the salt and the flour. And from there, we are going to be adding some Crisco. I've got a 1 cup stick of Crisco here. I will be only using half, so let me go get that ready. Okay, so we have our 1/2 cup of shortening at room temperature cubed here. We are going to add that to the flour mixture. Now, I talk a lot about tools, but one of the best tools in your kitchen is your hands. I naturally need to be clean, but I like to get a little flour on the shortening. So then you're going to bring your pastry cutter in. I've sped this up, but we're going to keep chopping until we get the shortening into very small pea-sized pieces. And, use your fingers to keep pulling the shortening off of the cutter. That's what it's going to look like. To this, we're going to add 4 tablespoons of ice cold water, and we're going to move around the bowl, pulling the mixture up so that we evenly get the water throughout the dough. Putting our pastry cloth back down, we are going to get it prepared with flour. I love this little tool. It's such a great thing to use for sprinkling flour on things. And you don't have to be afraid to use flour. You don't want anything to stick. And this is a brand new cloth. So I'm going to bring my pastry dough onto the cloth. And I always talk about Play-Doh, but it's kind of like Play-Doh again, where we're going to kind of just bring it all together. It's crumbly, and that's one of the reasons why it's such a flaky, delicious pie crust. So I'm going to take my little thing and put a little more flour on there. And then I'm going to take my rolling pin, and I'm going to, kind of moving it around the dough, I'm going to create a small circle. Now it's at this point that I like to pick that up and turn it over. And you can see it's still crumbly. So this is normal. And this will be very interesting because this won't be a perfect experience, but you'll see that in the end we end up with a perfect pie crust. See, there we go, the dough caught onto my rolling pin, and I'm not getting a perfect circle. Now, ordinarily I might stop and cut some pieces and fill them in so I get that fixed, but I want to show you that it really doesn't matter, that this dough is so flexible. You can make it look great regardless of any issues you might have. So I need to flatten that a little bit more, and it's ready to go into the pie plate. So in order to do this, we're going to make sure we have enough in size for the pie plate, and we're going to place our rolling pin on top of the dough and then lift up the corner of the pastry cloth. Now, I should have brought my pie plate a little closer to the dough, but you're going to lift the dough up and you're going to place it into the pan. Now, I didn't have a great outcome. It's not in the pan 100%. But you're going to see that despite all the trials and tribulations we have, we're going to end up with a great pie crust because this dough really is so incredibly flexible. So when you're making a one crust pie, you're going to want there to be a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch lip over the pie pan so that you can make a nice edge. So I'm going to cut that, and hopefully your kids aren't watching this because we would always say not to cut into your hand, but I have bad habits. And I'm now using those pieces to fix some of the little problems that I had with the pie crust. We're going to keep going around the pie. I'm going to find areas where I feel that it's too thin, because my goal is to have a lip on this pie that's of even thickness all the way around. And whether you have a perfect rollout or you have to do what I'm doing here, it's 100% achievable. And you'll see that in a few minutes. So I'm showing you, I'm just going to keep messing with this pie crust, and you can kind of see that my love affair with pies is continuing to have some challenges, but this dough, this pie crust, is so great that it won't matter in the end. So I'm just kind of feeling around, seeing how I like it. Now I'm going to make my lip. I'm going to pull up that edge, and as I find spaces where I don't feel it's thick enough, I'm going to take a little extra piece of pie crust and fill it in there. And once we crimp this pie crust, you won't know the difference. So you just go all the way around the pie, pulling that overlap up to create a well for the pie. And it doesn't look very good right now, but it will. Now, I found another spot where I wasn't happy with the thickness, and I just added a piece to it. And this piece doesn't want to stick, but actually that's going to end up being a great outcome in the end. So you keep doing that until you have this lip all the way around the pie. Now just feel and make sure that you've got this thickness, this even thickness that you want. And that's going to become important in the end when you crimp the pie crust. So we get all of the overlap pulled up. We've got our well, and now we're going to add another little repair and continue to do that and get ready to do our crimp. Now this is something my mom taught me. I really think it makes for a beautiful pie, because you don't want it to look like this, right? And so when you're happy with the thickness of the pie crust all the way around, kind of even smooth it out there, make it stand up nicely, use your hands and kind of get that clay standing up the way that you want it to. And now we're going to crimp the pie. And in order to do that, we are going to use our thumb and our pointing finger. And one side's going to push in and the other one's going to push out. And this is how you crimp a pie crust. Keep trying it. I got to tell you, my mom used to get so frustrated with me. I just couldn't get this down to save my life. But once you figure it out, it becomes very natural. And you can see one of my little pieces wasn't sticking 100%. It's giving me a little challenge, but just stay with it. Push it back in and keep going around the pie until you've got this beautiful crimped edge. And this is, a lot of where the tool is your hand. A one crust pie, you're going to do this crimped edge. Later, I'm going to show you 2 crust pies, not in this post, but a future one when I do cherry pie and apple crunch pie, and you'll see that we do that a little differently. But just keep going around until you have that crimped edge all the way around the pie crust. And you can see we've got, a beautiful shell. Just make sure it's to your liking. Now, if you're going to fill this with pudding, you could bake that for 10 or 15 minutes, but we're going to make a quiche Lorraine, and I'm going to make it my favorite recipe, which is from this 1969 Betty Crocker cookbook, and you can see it's very worn. I'm going to take my pastry cloth and put it in the refrigerator. To this pie, we're going to add a cup, 4 ounces of shredded Swiss cheese. I didn't have Swiss cheese, so I had to use Gruyere. And then you're going to chop 10 to 12 slices of bacon. I actually only had on hand the Costco pre-cooked bacon, but I make this with fresh bacon as well. And then 1/3 of a cup of very finely diced white onion. And you're going to want to use your hands to gently incorporate all of this together so that you don't have lumps of onion and lumps of bacon. Now to this we're going to add our custard, which is 4 eggs, 2 cups of half and half, and salt and pepper. Once again, quarantine time. I did not have half and half, so I used a cup of milk and a cup of heavy cream, which now is my new go-to. I'm never going to buy half and half again. What a great way to only have 2 products and be able to use it like it's 3. So take a fork, move that cheese and that bacon around. I'll have this filling in the recipe section. And now we're going to take this pie crust and we are going to put it in the refrigerator for 30 minutes. After the 30 minutes in the refrigerator are up, we baked this pie at 425 for 15 minutes and then lowered the temperature to 375 for an additional 45 minutes. As you can see, you really can't tell all the trials and tribulations we had with this pie crust. It's beautifully browned. The filling is delicious. The Gruyere actually browns up a little nicer than the Swiss cheese. But what's most important is how flaky this pie crust is. And I'm going to try to see if I can show you kind of up close just the flakiness of this particular recipe. It really is delicious. Now the techniques that we've used in this video could be used for your own pie crust recipe, but I really do highly recommend this one. So that's it. Easiest pie no one said ever. And even now, sometimes it goes perfectly and sometimes I struggle like I did today. But the outcome is always the same, which is a delicious, flaky, wonderful pie crust. So that's it for today's video. I hope everyone's staying safe, staying at home, and I look forward to my next opportunity to show you something delicious. Take care.